Welcome back to the Mindset Podcast. I hope you're all doing well, staying fit and staying safe. The Instagram page is up and running and the name is The Mindset Project, all lowercase, no spaces. I thought I'd just do a little bit of background on myself for those who either haven't listened to the previous episode or just want to know more about me. So I am a competitive swimmer and I compete at university and national level, and I also recently qualified as a personal trainer back in February of last year. Now, I have only swum for 8 years and I learned to swim when I was about 10 or 11, which is actually quite old for most swimmers. Now, your professional swimmers have probably been swimming a lot longer than myself. I would say I am sort of a natural, as I pick things up very easily and I developed quite quickly in terms of going through the Learn to Swim programme. I'm kind of considering doing an episode where I discuss my journey through sport so far and how I developed with mental challenges, including dealing with performance anxiety. Now, my expertise lies in the field of mindset and motivation, which will be the running theme of this podcast if you haven't guessed by the name already, or you didn't tune into the previous episode. So I basically want to explore the mind and challenge your perspective in things I believe have helped me grow, and not only as a person but as an athlete as well, because there are so many things in life which are intertwined and we don't even realise it until we look at them in focus or through like a microscope. So that is your first deep thought, I guess, and it's not even 5 minutes yet. So this episode I have titled Surviving a Pandemic, because I wanted to discuss my experience in the global pandemic and how I managed to cope in lockdown, because there was a lot of things I learned about myself last year which I believe may help you in the future or at the current time if you are indeed living under lockdown restrictions. And of course, this topic is pretty relevant as here in the UK we are in another lockdown, and you may be too wherever you're listening from. So I will discuss the 5 things that have helped me stay positive and get through it, and there are a few stories that I want to share with you. There are a few lessons to be learned, I guess you could say. So generally speaking, I am quite mentally tough, so I wasn't too worried or scared about going into a lockdown. I actually found it quite exciting, as it was something I haven't really experienced before, and getting excited about it was probably a better reaction than, say, worrying, which could have led to panic buying and all that nonsense. And I do remember some of the rumours going around last March about the army patrolling the streets and that you were only able to come out of your house unless you needed food, and to be honest, some of those things just made me laugh. But what my worry was that I wouldn't be able to train. So before lockdown, I trained about 6 days a week, clocking up about 14 to 16 hours of training per week, which included pool time and gym sessions, and it doesn't include things like pre-pool or stretching or recovery time. So in lockdown, that went completely down to zero. So it was a huge change, and I mean, it's probably a huge change if you're working 9 to 5 and then you end up having to work from home, or you're forced out of work, which means you end up on furlough, that sort of thing. And this was a huge change for us all, because we basically had our routines and our livelihoods stripped away from us pretty much overnight. Now, normally I feel sluggish after missing one session in a normal circumstance, which was my worry, because if I was feeling sluggish after one session, how was I going to feel after 1 month? Because at this point, we only kind of expected it to be a month that we would be out of the pool, and I was actually telling myself that everything was going to be back to normal by May, which was questionable to say the least, because, well, it's now January and there's literally no progress being made. But anyway, I chose to see this lockdown and pandemic as an opportunity to grow in a very weird way. So for anyone who is listening who may be an athlete or has a list of goals that you want to achieve, then this should have shown you how much those goals really meant to you. And I said to myself, training has been cancelled, but why does that mean I had to stop completely? Like, it didn't. Now, if I was as serious as I know I am about swimming and training, I would get out there and maintain my progress as close as I possibly could. So the first thing I did was maintain a routine. Now, I'll talk a bit more in detail about routine in another episode. And what I did was, if I had training at 10 a.m. on a Monday morning in our normal routine, then I would train at that time in this lockdown routine. And it was the same if I was eating. If I ate at 4 p.m. on a Wednesday evening, then I would eat at 4 p.m. in lockdown. Now, this was the first stage of my way to cope with the impact of lockdown. Now, I was constantly thinking, how can I replicate a normal routine into this really weird, obscure one? Now, I didn't have weights or anything for strength training, so I used books, I used tins of food, and what I did was I just stuck them into like an old rucksack and put it on my back and used that as kind of like a weighted vest sort of thing, but like obviously it's on your back. And who actually knew that in 2020 you'd be doing bicep curls with a tin of beans? Like, who actually thought that was going to be the case? No one. But here we are. I also didn't have a bench to do bench press, so what I used was a few chairs and I lay on them. Now, it wasn't great, but it worked, it got the job done, and it was absolutely better than nothing. Now, if you follow me on Instagram, my name on Instagram is Lewis_Conde, you'll be able to see a few of my lockdown workout videos, and you'll now think, okay, those are relatively simple to replicate. How on earth did I replicate an experience of swimming? Well, that one was quite easy. I hiked almost every day. Now, I study in Stirling, and there is a hill quite close to the university campus called Dimayet, and one of the things people say is that you need to do Dimayet before you end first year. Now, I hadn't, and let's be clear, I am a swimmer, so I'm not a fan of walking, I'm not a fan of cycling, and I'm definitely not a runner. So hiking felt like a combo of walking and running, so to me, initially it felt like it was quite grim. And I first went up, I think it was just before lockdown had happened. It was the week our training was cancelled, so I think we trained on the Monday and the Tuesday, and our training got cancelled on the Wednesday, and I'm pretty sure it was the Thursday or Friday that I went up for the first time. And so one of my teammates was like, why don't we go up to Maya? And I was like, fine, I've never been up before and it'll be fun. I think it was in March as well, so that's kind of like when the weather's starting to get better, it's warmer and sunnier. I also didn't expect it to be so high. I think Dimayet is about 400 metres high, which isn't the height of a Munro in Scotland, which is why it's considered a hill. I think a Munro is about over 800 metres. And when we got to what I thought was the top, my friend Sophie was like, we're not even near the top yet, and I don't even think we were 25% to the top, and I genuinely thought she was actually having a joke. But when we eventually got to the top, the view was really, really good, and I do recommend anyone who is from Scotland or who is travelling through Stirling that you should take a trip up there, because the views are pretty incredible, like on a good day if you were. You could also see the whole of Stirling and the castle and the Wallace Monument, and you could also see the Forth Road Bridge, which is about 30 or 40 minutes car drive away. And I was out of breath, my legs were aching, my lungs got a good beating, all of the things that would normally happen if I had swam. So that's what I did every day from March to June, and this is where I kind of got the idea to doing this podcast. Like, I've not actually listened to many podcasts, if I'm being perfectly honest. The only one I have listened to and follow is the Man That Can Project by Lockie Stewart, which is a men's mental health podcast which has some incredible stories from a number of different guys. Lockie's based in Australia, and I think he's a life coach actually, and the guys he interviews have either had failed careers, on the verge of suicide, and had revelations, and is extremely eye-opening, so I would highly recommend you go and check out his podcast. So back to my trip up Dimayet. In many ways, going up Dimayet every day was like a mental cleanse, if you like. Now, the reason I say that is there was always something I was thinking about, or an idea that had begun to form in my head. Now, like even just now, if I'm feeling pretty shit or down, then I will go up, whether it's raining or not, and I feel a lot better. Like, I can't really explain it, but when I go up there, it feels like my thoughts are a bit more clearer, and they seem to be more focused. And that's another reason why it was a good substitute for my swimming, because my mind goes at 100 mph 24/7, and the only time that is generally calm or focused is when I'm in the pool or like in the water, which is really weird. Now, the funny thing is, if there was one day when I looked at my window and it looked miserable, it was cloudy and it was windy and it looked like it was going to piss down because it was like so grey, like so dark. Now, obviously, I did contemplate going up because obviously the weather wasn't great. But then I remembered something I said throughout my swim season: think less, do more. Instead of backing away, just do it. Now, this is a phrase a lot of us can relate to in some way, I think, and it relates to a lot of people. A sort of example I can come up with is if I see a pair of shoes I like, or in fact anything that I want to buy, I know I can afford it, but I just think I can't afford it, if that makes sense. And I could be looking at them for a week and then decide, nah, it's too expensive. Where in that time, that whole week that I've been thinking about doing that, I've been wasting energy and time by actually thinking about it rather than taking action. And another example, if you're wanting to post a picture on Instagram, for example, you leave it in your drafts before actually posting it. Now, it could be there a few days or even a week until we actually pick up the courage to post it, and we've actually spent more time thinking about doing something than actually doing it. And the thing is, you'll never know what the consequences of something are until you've actually done it. And even if it does have a negative consequence, the way you react to that negative consequence can actually change everything. Now, you might spend £100 on shoes, and it means you're out of pocket by £100. Then that means for the next month you could be struggling. But you can always take a positive from that. And we always seem to choose to react negatively because it is far easier to do that. But if we choose to act positively, then that changes everything. And I swear to God, you'll start to see a huge difference when you start thinking like that. And like I say, it doesn't matter how bad the end of a result is by a decision you've made. You can always take something from it. Now, one quote I like is, "I never lose, I either win or I learn." And it is so true. Now, it basically means you can never lose or fail something if you choose to. It's always your choice how to react. So instead of spending so much time thinking about doing something, just do it. It could be buying those shoes, posting that post, or even just going on a holiday. Now, obviously in terms of a holiday, don't go just now because it isn't safe to, but you get the idea. Holidays are expensive, yes, but the thing that is probably putting you off going on holiday is actually the cost. Just think about all the money that can't buy experiences that you'll have on the holiday. You'll probably have so many memories from that holiday, and you cannot buy a memory. You can't buy time spent with friends, you can't buy laughter, you can't buy joy. It's something that money, there's no price to put on things like that. So back to my walk up to Maya. So it was cloudy and it was raining and it was cold, and as I got nearer to the top, the clouds got thicker and then they got lower. And it got to a point where I actually couldn't see the top, and I wondered if it was actually safe enough to keep going, because when you get near the top there's like a lot of stones, so obviously when stones get wet they just become really slippy, and these stones are kind of like really sharp and like edgy, so if there was for me to like slip or anything, I could have like cut myself, and I was on my own as well, which wasn't great. Obviously I began to contemplate whether I should have kept going, and then I looked down in front of me at my feet and saw the footpath, and it was clear, so I continued. Now, the interesting thing here is that no matter if you can't see the end result or the end destination, if you can see the path to get there, then that's all that matters. And we see this a lot in swimming, where swimmers, typically younger swimmers, often focus on achieving times to qualify for nationals. That is them focusing on the end result or the destination, but they're not actually thinking about the path or the process to get there. Which, to be fair for younger swimmers, is okay, because that's all they think about. Just swim fast, get all the medals, all the prizes. But as you get older, you do think more about the process. For younger swimmers, it is kind of okay for them not to think that way, as they should be enjoying the sport, but there should also be a slight more encouragement, I think, to think about the process and not just the medals or swimming fast, because it can be quite deflating, especially for your younger swimmers, if they're thinking about getting the medals or thinking about getting a time and they don't achieve that, then sometimes it can be quite deflating. And I'm saying that from personal experience. Like, it can also be the same for people who are wanting to lose weight. They might have an ideal body image in their head, or they might have an ideal weight to get to, and that is them thinking about the destination, but they might not actually be thinking about the process in which to get there. Because obviously you're going to have to think about eating well, exercising regularly, and doing all those things that's going to get you to the destination that you're wanting to go to. Another question that you might ask yourself is, do I need more sleep? Because of course sleep helps recovery, and the better your recovery is, the better your results are going to be, which means it's going to be far easier to achieve that destination that you've set yourself. And another question that you might ask yourself is, do I need to eat less fatty foods? And it's these sort of questions that you need to ask yourself throughout the process in order to get to that place or that destination that you have in your mind. And you could also apply this to students as well, because when you study a 4-year degree, obviously at the end of that you expect to have your degree at the end of that process, so getting that is your destination. And of course people will want a first, but if you can't see how to get there, then you won't be able to, because it'll be a lot harder, and you're going to have to think about the path to get there. So are you going to have to put in the work? You've got to read more books, attend the lectures, read above and beyond what the prescribed reading is, and just generally give 100% in everything that you do so you can get the most out of everything. And I guess the moral of the story is, if you can't see how to get there, i.e. focusing on that path, then it's going to be a lot harder to get to the destination that you have in your mind. Now, if I was unable to see the path, then the chances of me reaching the top would be a lot slimmer, and I probably would still manage to get there, but it's probably going to be a lot harder for me. Now, that's the same for me in swimming. Now, if I can't see the process, then the destination is going to be a lot harder to reach. And I can't really explain it, but when I was up Damai, it definitely didn't feel like I was alone. It felt like something was drawing me to it, so that I learned and saw it from this perspective. And there was another similar day where it was raining, it was clouds, etc. The same sort of scenario. And on my way back, I was walking down as fast as I could because I just didn't want to get stuck in the rain. And I looked to my right and there was a double rainbow. Now, you might not think there's anything huge or special, and to an extent, yeah, you're right, but I think considering when I go up there, there always seems to be some sort of sign or message that comes to me that makes me think in like a really deep way. And I think this was another sign, and it's not always a physical sign. It could be a person, it could be weather, or just the path, like what I discussed earlier. Another thing that continues to happen to me even now is bumping into strangers. Now, when I say that, it probably doesn't sound like much, because obviously if you're out and about, then you're obviously going to meet strangers, but the ones I met kind of had something like a lesson for me to learn. And I'm kind of one of these people that thinks everything happens for a reason. Now, the first time I remember it happened when I was a day I was having second thoughts, because I was really lacking motivation and it was really foggy. But as I was getting higher and higher, it started to clear, and it was actually a beautiful sunny morning, like at the top. And the weather between Damai and on campus was like chalk and cheese, and it was like so different. And it was actually really hot as well, so I had to take my jumper and my jacket off because I was absolutely sweating. Now, I couldn't have actually chosen a better time to go up, and there was me contemplating going up, thinking that I actually wasn't going to. And obviously, because it was a lot warmer and nicer, I did spend a little bit more time at the top than I would normally, and it wasn't too windy either. So, but when I started coming down, one of the other walkers that was also coming down, she looked like a professional because she seemed to have like all the walking gear, like she had the boots, and those like walking sticks. And what's actually quite funny is I managed to slip just literally 2 seconds after I left, so I don't know how I managed to slip when it was hot and dry, but I did anyway. And then she was like right behind me and she shouted something like, "We've got a faller, everyone." And obviously there was about 10 people at the top of Damai, so they all looked at me, and then I just like started laughing. And she then offered me one of her hiking sticks, which I don't know if she was trying to like be funny as like in a joke or anything, but it was a kind gesture. But I was like, no, I'm fine, thank you. And then after that, like we literally just walked down together, and then we got talking. Now, the conversation started with this woman saying how she used to come up here when her son was at university, as he trained at the university. And I initially thought, if she says he was a swimmer, then this is going to be really creepy, because what would the chances actually be of this woman happening to speak about swimming when I was, and her son going to the same university that I was? Like, what are the chances of that actually happening? So I then told her that I was studying there as well, and then the reason that I enjoy coming up here was because of lockdown. Like, I kind of like started enjoying hiking more, because obviously being in lockdown, that's one thing I started doing more of. And then she said that her son was a paraswimmer, and I was like, right, you literally could not make this up. How on earth is this even possible? This random woman happens to be talking about swimming, and then I told her my own journey in swimming, and she told me her son's. So now he does sailing, and she also said that she enjoys going abroad for competitions, and she preferred that because obviously, if you know, swimming is mostly indoors, it's really hot, and the gallery is really steamy and obviously stinks chlorine, which, you know, as a spectator sport is not great. And she said that obviously when she watches her son do sailing, it's obviously outdoors, which is a lot better, and of course being outside you'll get more sun and obviously a tan. And then she talked about funding for the sport, because obviously funding for paraswimmers is slightly different for able-bodied swimmers, and how it is structured in terms of performance as opposed to work ethic and time invested. Now, I think she was from the West as well, because everything she said had a very strong Glaswegian accent, which just made everything funny. And when we were actually coming down, there was obviously people coming up, and she was encouraging them and motivating them, which is what I was actually needing that day, because if you remember, I wasn't too keen on going for my walk, and I was lacking motivation that day. And she even offered me to take me back down to campus in her car, which was obviously a generous offer, and it was really kind, but with all of the restrictions and stuff, I had to say no. Now, I genuinely felt like I'd known this woman for years. The conversation just seemed to click, and it was obviously because of that interest with swimming, and the chances of me meeting one person to talk about swimming in that level of depth is really, really small. And then before I left and she drove off, she wished me luck in swimming and my personal training. Now, it's these small things in life which have a huge impact on them, and we don't actually see them until we actually think about them. Now, the interesting thing here is I obviously didn't have motivation to go for that on that walk that morning, but I pushed myself to do it, and the fact that I did, I kind of had this motivation from this complete stranger, and if I hadn't went for that walk, I probably wouldn't have had that conversation with her in the first place. So I kind of think, going back to what I said earlier, we don't actually know the consequences of something until we do it. So I didn't know that this woman was going to be there. I didn't know that she was going to be so positive and energising, but because I did, I found that out, if that makes sense. And I kind of had a gut feeling that morning to go up. Now, if you do have a gut feeling to do anything, just do it, because normally your gut instinct is always right. Now, there was another time which I could see the clouds getting closer and closer, and this was the time where I saw this double rainbow. And like I said, I was running down so I would miss the rain clouds. Now, I left after this woman was definitely an experienced hiker, because she had everything. She had the boots, she even had the little hiker bag, and she also happened to be going at some pace, which kind of gave me this idea that she was experienced in some way at least. And about halfway down, it got really cloudy, and then, as I said, there was a double rainbow. So I am quite a spiritual person, but I don't believe in God or anything like that, but I do believe in things like horoscopes and signs. And what I mean by signs is when someone says, oh, if you've got an itchy hand or something, it means you're coming into money, that sort of thing. And it's kind of a superstition, I guess, if you can call it that. I'll probably do an episode on this sort of topic, because I think it would be very interesting to get really deep into this topic, because it's kind of philosophy and the meaning of life, and I think everyone looks for something to believe in, whether it is God or religion or the universe or whatever. We always look for something that can kind of, I guess, guide us in some way, and I think it would be interesting to do an episode on my own belief system, and who knows, you might find that you share the same belief system as myself. And many believe that a double rainbow actually symbolises a transformation, and this is kind of funny because every time that I've been up that hill, I've always had some sort of idea, or I've met people to motivate me and give me more confidence, and even though the rain was coming down, it kind of didn't really matter anymore because I saw that. And the reason I was running down was to avoid the rain, but I've never seen a double rainbow before, and this woman was like completely in awe. She was like, oh, I've never seen one of these before. I was like, me neither. And then she asked me if I came up here often, and obviously I said, the same thing, that I came up here more often during lockdown because there wasn't much else to do. And then we got talking about hiking, and she mentioned Ben Ann and then Ben Ledi, and they're both Munros that I've either went up or considered going up. And how on earth did she know that these two Munros were relevant to me? I mean, you might say that is some sort of coincidence, but was it really? I don't think it was, and I've said this before, I believe things happen for a reason, and I didn't feel alone up there, and it did kind of feel like really spiritual in a way, since this wasn't the first time a stranger had started talking about a subject that was really relevant to me, and at this point it just felt really normal. So that was my trip up to Myatt. So I'll go back to the things that helped me during lockdown. So the second thing that I did was make a 30-day plan. Now I did this just so that I could have some sort of goal sheet to keep me going throughout the 30 days. It also provided some sort of structure to my day. It's similar to like keeping a routine. And I wrote down 4 or 5 things that I wanted to do that day and then ticked them off as I completed them. Now this was to help me feel accomplished in some ways, because obviously I didn't have training or anything, so that sense of accomplishment was kind of gone in some respect. So there's actually no better feeling in this world than ticking off a to-do list or completing one. And it also gave me like some sense of direction, as everything was a bit up in the air, and a lot of people probably didn't really plan anything as they thought they couldn't. And if there is anything that we have learned about 2020, it is do not plan in advance, because you never know what is around the corner. And when I did my 30-day plan, what I did was I just planned a week ahead. So Sunday is normally my rest day, and it's normally where like I get things ready for the week and I plan things. And I think it's better to do it this way, because say you put on your 30-day plan that you have gym every second day, so that's 15 gym sessions that you've put on your plan. Then the first week you might be able to tick them all off because you've been to the gym, but then the second week there might be, a closure of your local gym, which means that you're going to have to change for the rest of the 30-day plan. Whereas if you just do the week, then you can kind of assess what you can and can't do on the Sunday, if that makes sense. And it also means that you don't actually have to change things about as much, whereas if it was like the 30-day plan and you planned all 30 days, then if something went wrong one day, then that could have a knock-on effect for the rest of the plan, if that makes sense. And the next thing that I would recommend is to make sure that you get your vitamin D. And I think the reason that the lockdown in March last year was not that bad was because it was like spring and the sun was out. So we were getting plenty of vitamin D, and the sun is our main source of vitamin D, and we were actually pretty lucky in the UK last year with the kind of summer we had. Now, we've been in winter and the sunlight is harder to come by, especially in the UK and Scotland. And I know in my experience, whilst living under restrictions since about October, when it starts to get darker, it has been tougher, and that is just not from myself, but friends who have spoken to me as well. And obviously when it's darker, you just want to like sit inside, put on like Netflix or something, like wrap up warm, whereas when it's sunny, you just want to get outside and you feel a lot more happier and positive, if that makes sense. So obviously like our main source of vitamin D is normally from the sun, but you can also get it from your supplements and particular foods. So foods that are rich in vitamin D are things like your oily fish, your red meats, eggs, and some cereals which have like added vitamins in them. So make sure that you're getting this crucial vitamin, because it aids your immune system, but it all has a positive effect on your mental health. And to prove this, like when you go out in the sun, you feel good, but obviously when it's dark and gloomy, then you kind of feel just like less motivated. So that was my third thing on the ways to survive this pandemic. Now, the fourth thing that I did was, this is kind of confusing in some ways, but it was to limit my time in front of the news. Now, you might think that is counterproductive, because obviously you want to be like up to date with everything that's going on, but I think looking back now, one of the problems was the news reports last year that came out kind of created a sense of fear, and I think that's what caused people to like start panic buying. And I think I watched the news maybe about twice from March to June, so that's 3 or 4 months, and I've watched it twice. And you have to just use your common sense when you're out. I think stay away from people, don't be silly, wear a mask when you have to. And personally, I didn't want to be like living in fear, and by limiting my exposure to the news, I was able to do that, which meant I probably was more positive than most and had more energy, as I wasn't being consumed by the awful data that was coming out. I guess what I'm saying is you focus on yourself, and that is probably the most that you can actually do. Like, if someone else is breaking the rules, then it's obviously not your problem, so just focus on you. And you shouldn't get yourself wound up because other people aren't following the rules. Like, that is their problem, not yours. So don't get worried about if people are breaking rules. If they're not following the guidelines, just ignore them and just do what you're doing to make other people safe. And yeah, it's annoying that these people are the ones that are probably causing restrictions because they're not following them, but just focus on you. That it's as simple as that. And the fifth and final thing that I did was doing something new. And this was kind of like to spice things up a little bit, because instead of me doing the same thing every day, it was more interesting. And there was a lot of things that I've wanted to do in the past, but because of like training and studying or whatever, I've never really had the time to do them. At least that's what I told myself. And obviously, with everything completely like gone, I had all the time in the world. And one of the things I set myself was to learn how to headstand and eventually handstand. And I can confirm that in fact I can do these now. So, well, at least headstands. My handstands are a bit dodgy, but they are getting better. And I'm pretty sure that there's something that you can think of that you've always wanted to do, but you've never had the time to do it. And if you are listening and you're in lockdown, just do it. Like, another thing that I wanted to learn, and I've been wanting to do it for years, is solve a Rubik's Cube. Now, I've had a Rubik's Cube for maybe, I don't know, like 5 or 10 years, something like that. And I've always kind of tried to solve the Rubik's Cube, and I've only ever, like before lockdown, I only ever managed to do one side at one time, which isn't helpful because as soon as you solve one side, then the rest of the sides don't match. But I have in fact solved the Rubik's Cube. I think the first time I solved it was in May, I think it was. But because I solved it once, then I was like, I can do it again. So the more I did it, the better I got at it. And now I do it every morning when I wake up in the morning, just to kind of stimulate my mind, because I'm really bad for when I wake up in the morning just to like look at my phone. So that's like one of my New Year's resolutions this year, is to stop looking at my phone and kind of like either read a book or solve a Rubik's Cube is the first thing in the morning. Now I'm trying to think of like other things that you could do. One thing I did do was solve jigsaws, and I've got a really hard jigsaw. It's only 500 pieces, but it's Cadbury Roses, and it's basically like someone's like kind of like tipped a tin of roses on the table and they've took a picture of it. And you might not think that sounds difficult, but when you have like 10 different blue sweets and 10 greens and 20 pinks, it's like so hard, because you think one pink will go somewhere and then it actually goes somewhere else. And I'm actually not too bad at jigsaws, but I swear to God, this one took about 4 weeks. I swear, it was really hard, and I gave it to my friend to solve, and I don't know why, but she decided to start it before she moved flats, and even she found it difficult. So, which kind of comes on to like my next point, and it's just kind of make sure that you're always doing something, because probably the worst thing you can do is just sit around and feel bad about what everything's going on. But if you just keep like being a bit more productive, I'm not saying like work yourself to like the bone every single day, but just, you know, keep doing things that just kind of like tick you over for each day, and before you know it's going to be the weekend, and then you just have to like keep doing that for however long that we're going to be in lockdown, and just enjoy it, because the more you enjoy it, then the quicker it's going to go through. Another thing that I found quite helpful was dancing. Like, you're going to probably think, why on earth is he dancing? But just find like a really like positive, upbeat song, put it on really loud, and you just like have a dance like that. You'll be surprised at how much that will raise your energy and your mood. Like, it sounds really simple, but it's so effective to do. And all it is just dancing. Like, just dance, just do it. Put on, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like a really good positive song, but just put on like a speaker or something really, really loud and just dance like an idiot. Even dancing on your own, it's probably better to dance on your own. Just dance. And I'm pretty sure it was Walk on the Moon who said, "Shut up and dance." And with that, I'll come to like a concluding comment. So to recap, the 5 things that I did to help me survive the pandemic was: the first thing, keep to a routine as closely as possible. Now I know it's pretty difficult to do it, but just try your hardest to replicate a normal sort of routine for yourself. Second thing, make a 30-day plan, and preferably plan your week in advance as opposed to like the full 30 days, because you don't know what's going to happen and it's very uncertain, so it's easier to like, you know, move things about and change things. And the third thing, get your vitamin D either from sun if it's out there, if you do live in a country where there is good sun exposure, not Scotland or the UK, and your obviously like your oily fish and your eggs. And the fourth thing is reduce the amount of time that you spend watching the news, because consuming yourself with all the data and stuff is probably not very productive, and you're probably going to start overthinking it and feeling pretty shitty about it. So just, I don't know, reduce it to maybe once a week or something. Obviously keep up to date with like new announcements and stuff, important things, but just don't, you know, look at the daily numbers that come out every day, because they're actually quite grim, so don't do that. And the final thing is try something new. Like, if you've always been putting off learning to do the splits, or you've always been putting off learning to do yoga, just do it. You've got you might have all the time in the world right now, so there's nothing stopping you from doing it. So I say just do it. Also, don't forget to dance. Put on that speaker, max volume, and just do it. Just dance like an absolute maniac. I do it every single day, sometimes before I wake up, and I feel motivated for the rest of the day. So I highly recommend that technique. Also, just smile, just laugh at like stupid things, laugh at the wall, laugh at paint drying, I don't know, just find anything to like make you smile. And with that, I would like to say thank you for listening onto this episode. Stay safe, stay positive, and I shall see you on the next one.